Hello, everybody. Can you all hear me? I hope so. Okay, well, welcome to SheSpark's first chat of 2018. My name is Thea Wood, and I'm thrilled to have all of you here with us. Before we get started with our special guest, I would like to remind you that this chat room works best on Chrome or Firefox browsers. So if you get a chance right now at the beginning, please switch over to one of those browsers if you need to. It'll just make the experience much more pleasant. Also, we'd like to thank Search Plus International for sponsoring this program. If you're looking for a job or a career change in 2018, submit your resume to searchplusintl.com. Search Plus is a boutique search firm, and they place women and men in STEM and executive positions across many industries, including transportation, high tech, and biomedical. And if you have your Chrome or Firefox browser ready, I'm very excited to introduce our special guest, Amy Charity. And she went a little dark here. Hold on a minute. I'm sure we'll get her right back in shortly. But Amy is a coach, author, speaker, and former pro cyclist who wrote the book, The Wrong Side of Comfortable. It chronicles her dream of her journey of leaving a secure career in financial services to chase her dreams of becoming a professional pro cyclist at the age of 34. And that made her almost 10 years older than most of the people who were competing at that time. So she has a lot of experience with hearing no. And there were some definite highs and lows, and even some failures before she made it to the US national team and competed in world championships. So now she's going to share her strategies for taking change head on with us. Now, real quickly, it looks like she popped out there, but she's back. There she is. Okay, Amy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
Wonderful. Okay, we have a double audio on you. Just want to make sure that your earphones are plugged in all the way.
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
I can, but again, we're getting a little double audio. So real quickly, let's try without the earplugs and see how we do.
Okay. Can you hear me okay here? Is that better?
Yes,
okay.
There we go. We're back.
Wonderful.
Well, everybody, we're super excited because today Amy is giving away a signed copy of her book, The Wrong Side of Comfortable, to 3 trivia winners. So stay tuned for trivia questions. And we're just going to jump right in and start asking some questions. So, Amy, at age 34, you were not the typical competitor for professional cycling. Besides age, what else was different for you?
Yeah, so at the age of 34, I had spent my entire life since college really focused on a career. And so I had gone straight from university to working in financial services. I worked at Capital One for 9 years, and my entire focus had been on kind of excelling in that traditional career path. And at that point, at 34, I had never done a bike race. I lived in Steamboat Springs, Colorado, which is a small mountain town here in the northwest corner of the state. I was married, had a dog, had a home, and a great group of friends. So I had a very happy life, I would say. But at that point is when I competed in my very first bike race. And everything started to take off from there. So I say I was atypical in that I didn't grow up bike racing by any means. I was not a collegiate athlete. I was more focused on school and career as I went along. And so to have made that dramatic change was quite a stretch, and something that was completely unexpected at that time and at that stage.
Okay, so when you looked at the people that you were with, and here you were in a different part of life, how did you get inspired to make such a huge radical change in the first place? I mean, do you just wake up one morning and say, I think I'm going to start professionally racing?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And what I say always happened is it was very incremental. So essentially I did that first bike race and then thought, wow, that was so much fun. What a great feeling that was to do that race. And I really enjoyed the training part. So I took these really small steps, and each step along the way evaluated kind of where I was and what the outcome was, and then what the next step would be. And I always encourage people who are considering making a change in their life, or if they're discovering something that they want to go after, it's taking those really small steps and then understanding, wow, that was great. What's next? And for mine, those steps were tiny at the beginning. They were literally, okay, I need to buy the right cycling clothes. I need to buy the socks that are the right height. I need to make sure that my bike is on par with what some of the others have. And then eventually I hired a coach and made those small steps from there. And I eventually reached the point where I had to make the bigger trade-offs and the bigger steps, but it certainly was not overnight. And I think any major change that people make, it's a great way to do it is just take those initial steps, move yourself in that right direction, and then see where it takes you, evaluate at that point.
Okay, so I have to ask, what was the reaction of your friends and family?
Yeah, so I think it was really mixed, to be honest. So the traditional path for somebody to go into professional athletics is typically when you start younger and you build your way through it. And as the average age of cycling, for example, is women in their early to mid 20s. So parents, my husband, all of them thought, wow, that's a big jump. This is fairly late in life, but I'd say they were also very supportive. I was lucky. My husband was previously a bike racer, and so he understood that kind of need that I had, that passion that I had, and why I would even consider doing something that wasn't lucrative, that didn't make sense at that point in my life. He was incredibly supportive because he understood what it really meant to go down that path, and to understand, wow, it's an untapped desire. I don't know what I'll be able to accomplish. So to really try to see how far I could take it. I would say my colleagues were, they had different thoughts on it. They thought, wow, this is, you are doing well in a career, and this is not a typical time to make a change like this. So that was challenging too. I had really, really mixed reviews and mixed opinions. So it really, for me, I had to evaluate, okay, here are some naysayers and here are some people who are really supporting this, and really had to be confident in my decision because I was getting really mixed reactions.
Absolutely. And I want to get back into some of that more about the naysayers here in a minute. But right now, I think we're about due for a trivia question. Which is always a highlight of our chats that we started. Audrey and I actually started on Twitter about 2 years ago. Oh my gosh, is it 3 years ago now? Oh, something like that. But what we do is every video chat, we will give away 3 prizes to, or a prize to 3 different trivia winners. And basically this is how it goes. I will ask a trivia question on the air, and then the first person who puts the correct response in the right sidebar under the chat comments area wins, this time, a free signed copy of Amy's book, and it is called The Wrong Side of Comfortable. And so we're super excited, and I want everybody to make sure that they're ready. Get your hands on your keyboards or your phone, because here comes our first trivia question. And here it is. In 1973, who was the first woman professional player to beat a male professional player on the tennis court? in 1973, who was the first female professional player to be, Kim got it, Billie Jean King. That's right, Billie Jean King. And this was actually done off of a dare that turned into one of the biggest publicized tennis matches of all time. And she beat him. So we're super excited about that. Kim, get back to me later on here. We'll talk and make sure that we get a mailing address where Amy can send you her book. Congratulations. This is very exciting. This is why we love our chats. Thank you, Amy, for doing this.
Yes, well done, Kim. That's great. What an inspiration she is too, Billie Jean King.
Well, what we're going to do is, for those of you who just joined us, we're talking with coach, author, speaker, and retired U.S. national team cyclist Amy Charity about strategies you can use to make radical change for a better life. Now, Amy, in your book, you describe some heart-wrenching low points, including some interim failures. What was the hardest low point that you experienced, and what was your strategy to get over it and move on?
Yeah, so it was interesting. Bike racing is it's a challenging sport in so many ways. It's challenging physically. The racing is there's your physical limit, and it's a high risk sport. There are crashes in all races. So I think probably one of the low points that really stands out is I had just made it onto a professional team, and I was racing for a team called Vanderkitten, and it was fairly early season. And I did a race in Philadelphia and crashed early in that race. There was a big pile up. A bunch of us went down, and I ended up separating my shoulder in a fairly severe way, and was told immediately by the ER doctor that I wouldn't be on a bike for 8 weeks. And my team had me sort of pegged to do a race that really suited my racing style, which was about 4 weeks away. And so it essentially just put my entire season on hold. And if you think about something like bike racing, that's my job. My job is to be healthy, to be fit, to be training, to be on my bike. And when that is what you do and you're not able to, it's challenging mentally, because I can't do what I'm meant to do. It's challenging physically because you're so accustomed to riding your bike every single day. That was part of what I did for work, essentially, and you can't anymore. And so I was trying to be creative. My coach was wonderful in saying, okay, you're going to go out and you're going to hike mountains, and you're going to do whatever you can to keep your fitness and keep your everything that you need. So when you are able to get back on the bike, that you can do it. And so I think that was a big low point in really questioning, I understood at that point that my life was really out of balance, but in a way that it needed to be. And that was the bike racing life, was you sort of had to put all of your eggs in one basket. And so when that's what you're doing and you can't do that next race, that is really a challenging low point. So in terms of how you cope with that, I think, unfortunately, because there are so many crashes, there were other women who were in similar boats and not able to. I did absolutely everything I could to keep my fitness and to keep energized. I picked another race that was a little bit further out that I could do, and just stayed with a positive mindset. And that's hard to do. That's really focusing on the things that are still going well. And when you're an older cyclist, I wasn't 22 and could think, well, I have the next 10 years and this is just 1 year. It was, oh my gosh, like I only have a few years of racing in me, and this one matters. So I've got to do whatever I can to heal up and get healthy. But I think it's very classic. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
So there's a sense of urgency there. And unlike a lot of us, if we make a lot of radical changes in career or something like that, it might not be so physically taxing, but emotionally taxing. Where we feel we work, and then all of a sudden we hit this failure or an obstacle like getting hurt or we get sick.
Yes.
And the beginning of your book, you mention about, you give us the scenario of getting to the top of a hill or a mountain, since we know where you live, and trying to come up to this pass, and you're trying desperately to hit this record for women. Tell us how you felt just before you got to the top, to that pass, and what your coach told you about your time when you got there.
Yeah, it will forever stand out to my mind. I still get a little bit of heart palpitations when I even think of doing that ride again. But he really set me up, and in a good way, saying, okay, I think you're talented, and I think a way that we can sort of measure this is to see what kind of time you get on this particular climb. And it wasn't even in a race. It was just a climb in Boulder. And he said, I'm going to pace you, so you just stay with me. I know what you're capable of, but you will be at your limit. You are going to suffer like you've never suffered, because I know exactly how to take you to that limit. And so we had a set goal of a time that I would get to the top, and that would be the record-setting time for female cyclists up this popular climb. And I literally remember, I can't remember a time that I've been in more physical pain than at the top of that. And it was short. It was 16 minutes. Like, that's how long we've been on this call, right? Like, it was not long at all. But when you're feeling that kind of intense suffering of your heart, your legs, your lungs, your mind, everything wants to give up. And I made it to the top, and I remember barely being able to stand, and I was still trying to be composed around my coach, but I was beyond my physical limit, and I was kind of hanging on to that sign and could barely breathe and could barely keep it together. And I said, did I do it? And he very calmly said, I think you're off by a couple of seconds. And I was. I didn't quite make it. But
just gut-wrenching. And you know what? I feel the same way sometimes. It's like you work so hard to hit this goal, and you're going to make it, and you keep chugging, and you're like, did we make it? Well, no, we didn't. And I think that's really a hard part. The hard part about making big radical changes like this is, there is a possibility of failure or interim failures along the way. And like, for instance, with that one, how do you turn that around?
Yeah, that is just like life in essence, and that it took a while for me of course I was heartbroken and just like, how is that possible? How can I repeat that? Like that was as hard as I've ever worked in my life. How can I possibly do that again? But I think if you can glean some insight from that and think, this is what it's going to feel like, but it's worth it. Like, it's worth that end goal. And you just try to think of, what did I learn from that? I learned that I can dig so deep. Like, I learned that I'm not going to die. Like, I can do that. I can push that hard. I can go to that level. And so that's what I tried to take away from it was, okay, this is going to be challenging, but I think this is worth it. I love this. And there's another day, there's another hill, there's another mountain, and I'm going to go for that. So I think for listeners out there, when you're trying for these big, audacious goals, and every now and then you'll fall short, and you just know that's one step along the way. That's one step of you getting closer to accomplishing that big picture of what you're aiming for. So that, to me, while it wasn't the outcome I wanted, it was a critical step in me knowing what I was capable of doing.
So I have to ask, did your coach do that ride again later?
I ultimately did break that time that I was going for, and it was not for a while until it was actually a couple years later. And I think he just thought, let's focus on different climbs, and let's not go back there for a little bit, and let's just get you to continue to be a strong climber. So we didn't single-handedly focus on that one, but eventually I did break that original record that I had.
Well, that's good to hear. And thinking about that and interim ups and downs, successes and failures, how long did it take you from, I announced today that this is what I'm going to do with my life, to actually making it to the U.S. national team?
So it was 2013 that I made it onto a professional racing team. And the team that I started with was just it was a professional team, but it was very average in the rankings of US women's cycling. And even having made it on that team, I was ecstatic. Like, that to me was, I made it. I never even dreamed of getting a professional cycling contract. And that it was the following year in 2014 that I got the call, and all of these were last minutes. I was never a shoo-in for anything, and that's what made a lot of this really exciting. Was someone had fallen through the cracks or had gotten injured, and so they wanted to fill another spot on the U.S. team, and I was the next in line, and I was absolutely shocked by that. And they said, we want to see how you do. We want to see how you fare in Europe. Europe is a completely different place to race a bike, and we want to see how you do. And so that was exceeding every expectation I'd ever had. And that was about a year after I had gone on to the first professional team. So all of these were just, I would take that next step and get to the next level and just be absolutely beside myself that it was happening. Some of that is why I even wrote a book. It was like, whoa, what just happened over those 3 years? It all went by very quickly, and those little things turned into major things. So it was an example of just working hard, and there was nothing unique about sort of my abilities. It was just that I was really every single step along the way trying to figure out how to do the best I could, and then another door opened. So yeah, I think a lot of it's hard work, timing, a little bit of luck, a lot of establishing these great relationships.
And once you did make it to a professional level where you have a contract and you are getting paid for this, did it feel the way that you were expecting to feel? Was there anything unexpected about that whole experience?
Yeah, I think some of it's really hard. Like, it's hard to take in how well you're doing, because you're surrounded by people who are all doing great. So for example, if I'm racing in a World Cup race in Belgium and I finish 40th in a group of 150, to me, that's okay. That's like a B minus. That's a C plus. Like, I didn't win. I didn't get on the podium. I wasn't one of the best riders who's getting written up in the articles. And so I think what it's hard to do is it's hard to get perspective then and think, you know what, you're racing with the absolute best female cyclists in the world, and you've come into this late and you're older, and that's pretty good. And I think it would often take talking to my supporters, whether it's my parents or my husband or my friends, and getting that perspective, because when you're surrounded by people who are that strong, I think it's really hard to remind yourself that you're doing okay when you're not at the top. And so I think that was one thing that was very surprising, is all along it was hard not to think like I'm not doing well, when taking a step back, I actually was doing quite well to have made it to that level. So I think that part I had to remind myself over and over again, like, you're doing okay.
And I think that a lot of women and men experience in their careers, no matter what it is, where you get to a certain level, but maybe you don't have the revenues that others might have, or, the programming that I could be doing, it could be what these people are doing. And we're constantly comparing ourselves with others. And sure, competition, breeds some excellence, but it can also be demoralizing. And especially if you recall the failures, the so-called failures along the way. So that's why I think that this is an important discussion for people, no matter what their goals are, whether it's weight loss or getting a job raise or anything, is just being the best that we can be. And it sounds like for you, it's being extremely focused on what you're doing.
Focus is huge. And it's the point that you're making on figuring out what what works for you and what your strengths are. And I think that it was easy for me to feel like I was failing when I was comparing myself in certain types of races. There were certain things that I did not do well as a professional road racer, and I never was aggressive. I never liked that final sprint when you're going, 28, 32 miles per hour and you're elbow to elbow with other women doing the same thing. Like, I was never great at that. And one thing I think that my age helped me to understand was it's more important to know what your strengths are. I was what you call a domestique, and that means that I was a support rider for the teammate who was going to win. And I was good at that. I was good at carrying water bottles and protecting her from the wind, and being sort of that person who she could rely on me to get her close to the finish line, and then she would finish it off. And so I think that when you're considering your job or little things that you're trying to do and you're comparing yourselves with others, if you can really focus on those things that you do well, and don't worry about those things you don't do well, because that's okay. You can work on them, but know that you are unique in those strengths that you have. And I think that really is what made me successful as a cyclist, is I honed in on those few things that I knew that I did better than most. And the others, and there was a ton that I did not do as well as my competitors. And that became okay. It wasn't what I focused on. And I was clear with directors and with coaches and with teammates on, hey, here's what I can do for you. And here's where you don't want me around. And that became a way to find success. And I think that is a great takeaway in whatever it is you're doing. That applies at work. If you don't like Excel, that's okay. do the people stuff. Like, do the thing that works for you.
Well, and thank you for mentioning that, because I know that a lot of times we look at star athletes or business moguls and we think, oh my gosh, they're great at everything. And that's not the case. I mean, and I appreciate that you point that out, because we tend to try to put ourselves at that bar when it's almost unrealistic in many ways. And again, keeping on the focus of your strengths. Thank you for saying that, because I think we lose sight of that a lot while we're trying to reach or make these radical changes. That, that's the key. That's one of the keys to success. We're at about that point now for trivia question number 2. I hope everybody is ready now. And just in case you just joined us, the trivia prizes for today, the first person to answer the trivia question correctly in the side right chat bar in the comments will win a signed copy of Amy Charity's book, The Wrong Side of Comfortable, which chronicles her whole journey from making this radical change in a secure financial career to becoming a pro cyclist, and a lot of life lessons that were learned along the way. So if everybody's got their keyboards and their phones handy, I am going to read the next trivia question. And here we go. In 1984, Mary Lou Retton was the first American woman to win the all-around gold medal in which Olympic sport?
Oh, that was quick.
No, you are fast. She got it with gymnastics. Fantastic. Christy came in second. We've got Mona first. She was on it. Obviously a fast typer. That's right. Gymnastics. I don't know how many of people in the audience remember this. I remember it. It was a really big deal and very exciting for everybody. So thank you, Mona. What we need to do is get together after the chat, and you can reach me at thea@shespark.com, and we'll get your information and make sure that Amy can send you a copy of the book. Does that sound good?
Great, congratulations.
I was going to let my executive assistant answer this. That's great. Good. Okay, Mona is in. Excellent. All right. So next and for those of you who just joined, we are still talking with Amy Charity, who is a retired U.S. national team pro cyclist and now a coach, author, and speaker. And she's sharing her strategies for making radical change for a better life. And we've covered 2 strategies, really much, combating different forces around us, the gut-wrenching lows that can happen. And Amy, as the last talking point, we want to, before we get into our Q&A, we want to talk a little bit about, with a major life goal or transition, it can really seem overwhelming. And I mean, this could even be just like changing your diet because you have a heart condition, or changing, careers because this one is offering a dead end. Because it's so overwhelming and fearful, when you look at back, what were some of the ways that you handled taking those first steps and overcoming that fear?
Yeah, that is huge. I think with any sort of change, you reach a point where you kind of question, what have I done? And I think that's a very normal place to be when you're going through something different. And I think I hit that when I had left my full-time job. I no longer had this great benefits package. Everything in my life, all of a sudden I was cutting cable. I was got every single luxury that you have in your life. Those were going away because I had made this dramatic change from a well-paying corporate job to a cycling salary. And it was terrifying. So you take the financial side of things was huge. And then the second piece of that was I packed up my car and drove to Tucson, where cyclists tend to train and get ready for a racing season. And so that meant leaving my husband and my friends and my dog in my house. And I can tell you that drive, leaving all of this behind, my lovely little home in the snow, to go to the desert, was one of, I would say, the point of my life where I thought, oh my gosh, what have I done? Like, what have I done? So I think if any of you out there are considering making changes, I think the number one is you have this vision in your mind of what you're going towards. And in my mind, I had a vision of racing my bike in Europe and deafening crowds and doing really well in a race and finishing. And I thought, gosh, how far can I take cycling? Will I race in the world championships? Can I go to the Olympics? I had all of these sort of dreams in the back of my head, and that is what kept me going. So when you're thinking of, okay, I'm going to change careers, you think about, all right, so I'm leaving something that's safe, but here's what I'm going towards. And if every step along the way, you have that vision in the back of your mind, and you can still say it's worth it, even though I'm scared, I don't have the same financial resources, I am spending time away from my friends and my husband. If you can go through all of those sort of trade-offs that you're making and still that vision is compelling to you, then I think you keep moving in that direction. So I think that's one, is that vision. And I think the other key piece is surrounding yourself by people who are on the same page, like-minded, with the same goals. And in the case of cycling, Tucson is the hotbed for aspiring bike racers. And so that was a no-brainer to be there. And I started to take comfort when I settled into my life and routine there, that's what everyone was doing. I was very normal, that I was out at 9 o'clock in the morning and there were 100 other cyclists, and they were in their 20s or 30s, and they were out for a long day on the bike, and they were about to start their racing seasons. So I think the comparison is, if it's your job that you're trying for, or if you're getting your MBA, or if you're trying to learn a language, whatever it is that vision is that you have, if you surround yourself by people who are on the same page and going that direction, that is so helpful. You can take comfort. You're going through the same issues. You have sort of the same experiences. So I think in that time of my biggest fear and my biggest point of questioning what in the world I had done with my life, I think that having that vision in the back of my head and then surrounding myself by those people who were doing the same thing that I was absolutely critical for me to continue to go forward.
Well, and I think something that athletes have that the rest of us feel like we don't, but we do have access to, are coaches.
Yes.
We tend to forget that, we don't do this alone. We get help from other people. And while it could be people who are in the same boat, it might also be somebody who's been there, done that, and is an expert at helping bring other people up to their potential. Am I right?
Definitely. So I think coaches are, in general, it's accountability. It's someone who you say like, oh, I had a bad day. And that can be at work. That can be your mentors. That's somebody who you trust unconditionally, that you can tell them like things didn't go well, or yeah, I just gave a presentation, it was terrible. Or you can say, all right, help me with this. I don't know how to get from A to B. And that's what they are. And any type of coach. I know that in a work setting, my corporate experience, it was always critical to have those mentors that sort of kept you going in the right direction. And so I think in a bike racing, it's just very concrete and obvious. You follow your power meter and your heart rate and your mileage, and it's very tangible what it is you're working on. But to your point, absolutely, I think that you want to, whatever it is that you're aspiring to do, find those experts. And if you hire a coach, that's great. If you find a mentor who just has more experience than you, that's a great option too. But making that next step, having those people who've been through it before and can give you that critical advice is great. Like that's priceless. That accountability is so important in getting to the next step.
Absolutely. And you now have actually a coaching business in a cycling camp that's in Colorado. And, how do you approach it with these cyclists who come in, saying, okay, we're ready, you're ready for the big change. Here's what we're going to do. How do you structure that for people? So again, they're not intimidated and run the other way. It's so much fun to be on this end of things, because you hear the different sort of concerns or fears that people have. I had a woman this summer at my camp who was scared to go downhill quickly. And so first of all, we talked a lot about it. Like, okay, what are the fears? What can happen? Are you worrying about the bike or your own skills? And then we did a little clinic, and I showed her kind of, here's where you position yourself. Here's where the apex of the turn is. And then we went out and we started slowly, and she stayed right on my wheel and followed it. And she was able to get up to like 35 miles per hour going downhill, which is just amazing. Before, she was scared to go in the 20s. So if you can kind of get people through the steps and get them to understand what their fears are and to identify them, and then get them to a point where they feel safe, it's amazing. And you see that progress that people make. And we also had a juniors camp, and it was similar that, well, these kids are fearless. We actually had to make the opposite rule, which was you can't go in front of me on a downhill. You have to slow them down a little bit.
So, yeah, exactly. I was like, I'm going down first and you cannot go faster than me. They're like, what? So, but it's sort of the opposite, right? And then they're exhausted after 10 miles and they can't pedal anymore. It's like, see, that's why you have to slow down. So it's so much fun to be on this side of things and see what different challenges people have, and the different fears and concerns that whether it's adults or women or kids that they have, and to try to understand what they're thinking and how I can get them around that. It's incredibly rewarding. So I think whichever side of things you're on, if you're on the side that you're knowledgeable and you have a skill set, help people, be a mentor, be that coach for people. And if you're on the side that needs something, then ask for that help. And I think it's really rewarding on both sides.
And so important. Before we get to our Q&A portion, I do want to do one last trivia question, and then people who are in the audience, if they have any questions or comments for Amy, we'd love to hear from you. So for those of you who missed the last trivia question, this is how we're set up, is I will ask the trivia question, and then the first person to enter the correct answer in the right chat side will win a signed copy of Amy Charity's book, The Wrong Side of Comfortable, and we'll get that sent out to you. So everybody get your keyboards and your phones ready, because here comes our last trivia question of the day. And here we go. This one is actually a surprising one for me. And here it goes. Best known for her roles in Thelma and Louise and A League of Their Own, which actress made it to the Olympic trials in archery at age 41? Oh, I have somebody say, I know, but I haven't seen the answer yet. Okay, I'll repeat the question. Best known for her roles in Thelma and Louise and A League of Their Own, which actress made it to the Olympic trials in archery at age 41? Oh, Kim got it with Gina Davis. Yay! Fantastic, Kim. So we have got our 3 trivia questions all answered. And before we start the Q&A, first of all, thank you so much, Amy, for coming and doing this. This is really exciting. And I know everybody is happy to hear from you.
Yeah, no, this is great. I love the trivia questions. It's so much fun to have a conversation and hope, have the crowd on the side and see the different responses. So yeah, this is.
Oh, absolutely. It's really fun. And what we're going to do, just so you know, is this is all being recorded. And ladies and gentlemen in the audience, this will be available as a YouTube video after we get the post-production work done and uploaded. And it will be on the SheSpark website so that you can come and visit us anytime to rewatch or get some tips or hints or just fun things that we did here with Amy today. And now, if there's anybody who has any questions or comments for Amy, something that happened to you that you're interested in sharing, we are more than happy to hear from you. Don't be shy. We'd like to have lots of people participating, not just a one-way conversation. I will say that switching to be an image consultant for me happened at the age of 40. And I had left a lucrative career and had gone out to do this on my own. And the thing about being an image consultant, which might be a little bit like a cyclist, is you feel you're very independent. In my case, you don't have a team. You have you until you get big enough to actually build a team. And I think that's probably one of the hardest things to do, is if you feel like you're a one-man band kind of thing.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. It's just like, that's when you can seek out if there are others that have done it in some way and getting help from them. But I think that's so important. That's a huge challenge, is when you feel like you're alone. And I think even in cycling, when you have your racing team, you're training alone and you're constantly wondering, am I doing the right thing? And am I getting to the right level? So yeah, again, that goes back to relying on those networks is so critical.
Absolutely. We also had Kim, first of all, just wanted to say she wanted to acknowledge your courage in taking these steps.
Yeah, no, thank you. I know. And I always encourage people, the premise behind the book, The Wrong Side of Comfortable, is just that anything worthwhile requires you to get outside of your comfort zone. And I think that does speak to courage. It's taking those steps, and they're hard, and it's often uncomfortable, but that's where you find the things that are really worthwhile. And so that's the whole idea behind the book. And I hope people think of that when they're about to do something or thinking of challenging themselves into something, is, okay, this is going to be uncomfortable, but it'll be worth it. And that's where the sweet spot is. So I think that does speak to courage. And I always encourage people to look for that in their challenges.
Well, we've got Christine here, and she's asking, is it important to set expectations in the beginning?
Yeah, so I think that is critical. And I think one thing to set is you have your vision in the back of your mind, but what I would say to that is allow that, forgive yourself if you don't reach that exact image. And what I mean by that is, I always say that this image that helped me, propelled me forward, allowed me to continue even during the low points, was that vision of winning a race in Europe. And I never did win a race in Europe, but I finished and had some of these wonderful race finishes and some other experiences that were so fulfilling, that I think having that vision and those expectations in the back of your head are great, but I say that with a caveat, which is allow yourself to not have to meet it exactly, because things do happen. So you want that end picture in mind, but go easy on yourself and allow yourself to you have some things that don't go, just like that ride I did with my coach that I missed it by 3 seconds. Like, allow yourself to have that happen and know that that's an important step along the way. And even though I didn't meet my expectation there, I eventually got to the level I needed to.
And we have Jennifer here who asks, what advice do you have in trying to find a mentor in your field?
Yeah, that's a good one. So I think, reaching out, it all depends on the field you're in. I just recently spoke to a group, and one woman's goal and vision in life was to learn a language. And she was like, I live in a small town. How could I possibly do that? And there are groups of people who speak even French in this small town, and to find those groups and to reach out and to put it out there. It's amazing. Even in this small setting in this little mountain town, everyone in the room had an idea for, actually, I know someone who does that. And so what I would encourage you to do to find those mentors is tell people you know. That is, when you look at all successful entrepreneurs, they put it out there. They say, this is what I want to do. And they tell people. And by doing that, it starts to get the ball rolling. And maybe it's not the immediate friend that you told, but that friend remembers and someone says something about it, and it makes that connection. So I think the more you can tell people what it is you're trying to do, the more success you'll find in finding those mentors.
Excellent advice. We have a great comment from Kim. We all need to pull together as women leaders, which obviously we agree with. Mona said she switched job and career recently and is in a new industry, and she's almost 49 years old now. So she understands what you're saying about the courage of taking that first big step.
I love it. Yeah, you feel like you're on this set path. And I hear it again and again. I have friends in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and they say, oh, I wish I had done that instead, or I don't know what I want to do when I grow up. And I tell them, start now, start today, like make that change, because you don't want to look back and regret what you're doing. You have so many choices. Go for it. You're never too late. You're never too old.
Never too old, never too late. We've got one question here from Audrey saying, I think I heard Amy talk about dealing with naysayers. Any tips on how to deal with negative feedback from others? Yeah, so this is so much easier said than done. But I would say all along the way I was told no a lot when I was bike racing. Like, I was told, you were never going to be a bike racer. You don't have the kind of the sprint capacity, or you don't have enough experience to read races, or you live in a mountain town. You don't have kind of the dynamic finesse that you need. I had so many people tell me no. And I think that can be fuel to your fire. And I always tried to think of that as, number one, listen, see if it makes sense. And maybe it does. Maybe some of the things they said had a little bit of merit. And I think, okay, well, that's not my strength anyway. And so I'm going to focus on something different. I think sometimes those naysayers are out of line, and you can use that to help motivate you. And I found that there were certain women in the peloton that would say, oh, we don't have to worry about her. She can't do that well. And that is for me, that helped my drive. I was like, oh, wait, hang on a minute. I can do that. So I think that I wouldn't immediately dismiss naysayers, because I think every now and then they have a point, and you can listen to that and decide, is there merit to what they're saying? And if so, then think of, that's okay. I can live with that, or I'm going to improve that. And if there's not merit, then you think that's not true at all, and I actually can do much better. So I know that this sounds really simple, and I know it's not simple, because it can be crushing when you hear what people say about you. And I experience that a ton. Now, I know that as we get older, and this isn't just in sports where it's very apparent, but as we get older in our careers and wanting to possibly make a change, for instance, maybe we've hit a glass ceiling at one company and we want to switch companies where we have an opportunity for growth, but it could be very difficult because we're competing, let's say at the age of 49, 50 with people who are 30 years old. It's important for us to remember what we bring to the table that might not be immediately apparent because of perhaps what the top 3 things on the job posting says, or in your case, cycling, it's so physical. What do we bring to the table as older, more experienced people in these types of situations?
Yeah, that is such an important piece of all of this. And I always think that I had to go back and remember that although I haven't been racing for 10 years like these girls or 20 years like these girls, everything in my life has brought me to this point that has given me the knowledge that I need to perform. And I think that is true in your corporate setting. If you do a major job change, if you want to live abroad, with whatever it is that you're doing, know that those experiences in your life, even though in my case they weren't bike racing experiences, they all got me to that point. And I think physically, because women in their 30s and 40s are incredibly strong with endurance, more so than women in their 20s. And so I had to remember that I was stronger. I could go longer because I had that muscle memory from years and years of being an athlete. And so I think if you can remember that, especially in your career changes, well, maybe you don't know the latest in the Snapchat, but you do know what the broad picture of marketing basics and fundamentals are, because you've been around for a long time and you know how human interaction works on various levels because you've had those experiences. So I think the age is only a helper if you can use it to your advantage and know that's what's given me the maturity to remain calm. That's what's given me endurance in my case, and know that in your business setting too, like that, those experiences are just as valuable as you being 20 and knowing the ins and outs of social media.
Thank you very much for expounding on that. And before we start to wrap things up really quickly, can you please share with the audience the name of your camp, where it's located, and what's coming up for 2018 that people may want to participate in?
Yeah, thank you. So the camp, it's called Grinta, and the name Grinta is grit in Italian. And I know grit is a buzzword lately, but it's so important in anything that you're doing, and it doesn't have to be in sports or athletics, but we decided to call the camp Grinta because we think grit is a really important piece of cycling. And so we offer camps in Steamboat Springs in the summer we have a co-ed camp for adults, a women's camp, and then a juniors camp here in the summer. And so that's the big sort of events that I run in the summertime. And then I also do speaking engagements with corporate settings and with athletes and with kids, and speak throughout the country on these same topics that are really important, and they're applicable in really in anything you're working on. So those are the two big things that are going on right now.
Okay, and so for those of us who haven't ridden a bike in 10 years, is there any kind of program that won't completely freak us out and we could check out?
Yes, absolutely. So the women's camp that we ran last summer, we had a broad variety of women, and we had one come on a mountain bike and others on road bikes. So we really cater to all different abilities, and we split up in the morning and go out and do different distances. And some people are trying to descend faster, and some people are just trying to get in a 15-mile ride and feel good. So it's an amazing place to come and do yoga and spend time in the mountains and work on fitness. So the Grinta cycling camps are a great option that we say, well, we certainly cater to everyone. It's not professional bike racers that are at this camp. It's more for an experience of spending time in the mountains and learning some tips on cycling. So regardless of having not been on a bike for a decade, I think it's completely appropriate for a broad range of cyclists.